Have you ever wondered about the people who risk their lives in wartime to save others? Nurses, medics, and rescue teams face the same dangers as soldiers and play a vital role during those difficult times, yet they rarely receive recognition. This was the case for the Red Cross Air Ambulance Unit in the Romanian Royal Air Force, which transported over 7,000 wounded soldiers from the front lines during World War II, flying through crossfire and risking their own lives to save others. And the manpower of this squadron was quite unique because they were women. So let's talk about them. Hi, I'm Anna, a villager from Transylvania, and I make videos about random topics related to Central and Eastern Europe. And today we'll explore the incredible story of the White Squadron, Romania's all-female air ambulance unit, their fascinating backstories, and the daring missions they carried out. And I feel very qualified to talk about this because I flew a plane once, a little glider, for a few minutes, so clearly I'm an expert. Now, to address the elephant in the room, yes, Romania did some switching during World War II, and it wasn't always on the nicest side.
When it comes to World War II, I gotta go with my boys, the Axis powers.
But keep in mind that there's this thing called the Geneva Conventions, which are international treaties that set rules to protect people who aren't taking part in the fighting, like civilians, wounded soldiers, and medical personnel. And the conventions require that help be given to anyone who needs it, no matter which side they're on. And that's why Red Cross pilots, like those of the White Squadron, were seen as neutral and protected while rescuing the wounded. With that said, this video is purely educational and only focuses on the White Squadron. It does not support or glorify any political regime of the time, especially not the legendary state of Romania, because that would be illegal, and because I can read, and I have access to history books, and I understand why the legionary state was trash. So without further ado, let's dissect this topic. Here's a photo of the Romanian Royal Air Force, founded in 1924. And here's the list of its transport units. And here's the 108 Light Transport Unit, later dubbed the White Squadron, piloted entirely by women. Unlike most wartime pilots, they didn't fly to kill, they flew to save lives. And their mission was to rescue and transport the wounded from the battlefield, usually under extremely dangerous conditions. I mean, some of us are scared to fly anywhere near Ukraine these days. Imagine flying around the front line with the kind of equipment they had in the 40s. The squadron was the vision of Princess Maria Știri, a member of the Romanian Red Cross and an excellent aviator, inspired by the Finnish... Oh my god, I've suffered enough with Polish and Czech names lately, and I have no idea how Nordic languages sound.
Lotta Svärd.
Lotta Svärd. The Lotta Svärd was a Finnish women's organization that supported the military by nursing the wounded, preparing supplies, and running communications without taking part in direct combat. Marina decided to take the idea further and proposed creating a similar group operated entirely by female pilots, an idea that was approved in 1940. Surprisingly, she wasn't the first person to propose such an idea. Decades earlier, Elena Caragiani-Stoinescu had tried something similar, but she was rejected. Later, however, Marina's perseverance finally brought it to life. Next, we meet the Trailblazers, whose skill and determination turned a daring idea into a legendary reality. The aforementioned Marina Știri was the great-granddaughter of Barbu Dimitrie Știri, the Prince of Wallachia, which is why people refer to her as a princess. She was introduced to aviation at the Mircea Cantacuzino flight school, run by the renowned pilot Ioana Cantacuzino. Soon, Marina passed the wife check at air shows, where she became popular for her aerobatic skills. In 1935, at age 23, she completed training under Ioana Cantacuzino and earned her Grade 2 pilot's license. For those who don't know, in this context, the Grade 1 license was the entry-level certificate for basic flight, while the Grade 2 license was the advanced qualification granting pilots the skill and the freedom to take on long-range and navigational missions. The following year, she won Romania's first official aviation contest and undertook a solo raid across Northern Europe, flying from Bucharest to Stockholm. She became became even more famous after her plane zoomed and swooshed through the thick fog, crossing the Baltic Sea. In 1937, she attended the first International Technical Conference on Aerial Assistance in Budapest as a representative of the Romanian Air Club. Thanks to her initiative, 2 medical aircraft were acquired, each capable of carrying 2 wounded passengers and an attendant. In 1938, she participated in the Royal Military Maneuvers at Galați, which were large-scale exercises by the Romanian Royal Air Force designed to showcase the country's military readiness and strengthen its defense amid rising European tensions. Marina attended as a member of the Romanian Red Cross Management Committee, demonstrating her skill while flying a sanitary transport plane alongside other iconic pilots. It was during this time that she proposed the creation of a female-only medical squadron, and the Subsecretariat of State for the Air was like, approved! Interestingly, most pilots of the squadron trained at the same school run by Ioana Cantacuzino. So, who was she? Ioana Cantacuzino was the first woman to officially obtain a pilot's license in Romania because the one before her was rejected and had to get hers in France. Ioana was also descendant of the Cantacuzino dynasty, so we have lots of princesses in this story. She earned her license in 1928, taking the exam alongside 9 male candidates, including her brother Mircea, which is kind of relatable. I also have a pilot relative, but our parents don't allow us to fly on the same plane. Now the Cantacuzinos purchased Clem Model 20 airplanes for themselves, using them for air shows, aerobatics, and long-distance flights. Ioana's career had some ups and downs. She survived a plane crash unharmed, completed international flights, and co-founded an aviation club with her brother. Sadly, Mircea lost his life in a plane crash, and that's exactly why we're not allowed to fly together. After her brother's tragic death, Ioana stopped flying but remained devoted to aviation, funding a flight school in his memory. And that's the famous school where many members of the White Squadron trained. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there was someone else before Ioana, and that was Elena Caragiani-Stoinescu. Elena was a famous lawyer and international journalist who was fascinated by flight from an early age. She took her first flight in 1912 and enrolled in the Aerial League Pilot School, where being the only female student cost her some struggles. Despite completing her training successfully, Romanian authorities were like, not approved! So she traveled to France, where she trained at the Civil Aviation School in Montmelon-le-Grand, and at 27 earned her license from the International Aeronautical Federation. Unable to work as a pilot at home, she became a journalist and war correspondent, traveling through South America and beyond. When Romania entered the First World War, Elena actually offered to serve as a pilot, transporting wounded soldiers and medical supplies to the front, but the Romanian authorities were like, not approved! Instead, she worked as a Red Cross nurse in Bucharest. I mean, lawyer, pilot, nurse, gee, leave some talent for the rest of us too. Another famous pilot who was involved with the creation of the White Squadron was Irina Burnaya. She was born in Teleorman County, southern Romania, which is a place I completely forgot existed because I low-key never met anyone from there. Irina became a prominent lawyer, and during an urgent business flight, she discovered her passion for aviation. Later, she contacted the pilot for some guidance and enrolled in the Cantacuzino flight school. At age 24, she earned both her first and second grade pilot licenses and acquired a YR-22 plane with a 50% state subsidy. And she registered it as Irina, which is really cute. You know, YR is the standard Romanian aircraft prefix, and Irina, whatever. In the same year, she attempted a flight from Bucharest to Cape Town with her former instructor, but their trip ended in an emergency landing on the shores of Lake Victoria due to technical difficulties, which is still remarkable given the limitations of 1930s aviation. Soon, she became the first Romanian woman to earn an aerobatic pilot's license. In the beginning, she was involved with the preparations and training of the White Squadron, but shocked by the sight of wounded soldiers, she chose not to serve with them. Instead, she commanded a postal squadron in Transnistria. With these extraordinary women leading the way, the next challenge was the machines that would carry them into danger. Although the flights were humanitarian, the pilots held military rank as second lieutenants, received military pay, and wore uniforms to avoid being treated as spies if captured. And the craziest thing is, these planes were flying to the front line unarmed, and the missions were flown without any fighter escort. Insane. To protect themselves, pilots flew very low, around 50 meters, below enemy fighter altitude, yet they remained vulnerable to ground fire. All planes were initially painted white with red cross on the fuselage and wings, hence the name. Now, did the Geneva Convention say you're supposed to leave Red Cross planes alone? Yes. Did they all wear the Red Cross insignia? Yes. Did the Russians care? No. Despite these markings, Soviet forces attacked them as if they were regular military aircraft. So, later the planes were repainted in camouflage, dark green on top and light blue underneath, with the red crosses inside white circles. The squadron initially had two monospar ST-25 planes, previously owned by Prince Nikolai, but both were lost in accident. Tragically, during a training exercise, one of them crashed, taking the lives of 4 volunteer trainees: Victoria Komsha, Maria Adam, Jana Iliescu, and Maria Wojtek. The squadron was later re-equipped with 10 RWD-13 aircraft, including 3 medical RWD-13S planes that had fled from Poland after 1939, and each plane carried 1 pilot and 1 wounded passenger, sometimes accompanied by a nurse or doctor. Volunteer Victoria Pokol joined with her Bükerbü 131 Jungmann, because obviously all the cool girly pops had their own planes. Now the fun part is that most of these women were from wealthy and high social backgrounds who could have used their wealth and connections to flee the country and go to safety during wartime, but they were too busy flying around the battlefield unarmed and rescuing people, so yeah. But before we can tell the story of their first daring mission, we need to meet the early members. Nadia Nadezhda Russo was born in Tver, near Moscow, into an aristocratic Russian family. Orphaned as a child, she fled the Bolshevik Revolution, settling in Bessarabia, which was then part of the Kingdom of Romania. As it should be, if that's what they want. Hey, I'm a consensual unionist. To help her, her relatives set her up in an arranged marriage that, unsurprisingly, quickly failed, which was a common theme if you look into the lives of these women. Determined to forge her own path, Nadia trained as a Red Cross nurse and studied art in Chisinau. Her growing interest in aviation led her to Bucharest, where she enrolled at the Mircea Cantacuzino flight school. She purchased her own plane, half funded by the Ministry of Air, and she flew solo 4,000 kilometers in the Little Entente Rally, earning her 1,000 aura points. She was also a talented photographer and documented wartime aviation and daily life, but sadly her work got lost to time. And the funny thing is, despite her Russian roots, the Romanian press at the time hailed her as the most authentically Romanian Bessarabian woman. Mariana Dragescu was from southern Romania, and she excelled in sports from a young age, including skiing, swimming, rowing, and horseback riding. She studied physical education in Bucharest and trained at the Queen Mary Cavalry Regiment riding school, but in 1935 she realized that, contrary to popular belief, the horse industry isn't the most prosperous industry in the world. So she enrolled at Ioana's flight school, earning Romania's 7th female pilot license. She even met the writer of The Little Prince, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who was, surprise surprise, also a famous aviator. In 1938, Mariana was like, "Alright, time to become famous," and decided to fly military maneuvers in the aforementioned Galat military exercises. Then purchased a Messerschmitt aircraft and entered a few aviation competitions. Virginia Thomas, nicknamed Tommy, was born in Transylvania, which was then part of Austria-Hungary. She trained at the Cantacuzino flight school, earning her pilot license, then worked as a stewardess for Lares, Romania's national airline. With the outbreak of World War II, Tommy joined the White Squadron, flying missions that evacuated over 600 wounded soldiers from the front lines. Now, guess who continued assisting the wounded by driving them to Red Cross Hospital even after the squadron was disbanded?
Tommy,
Virginia Duțescu from southern Romania was a drama student in Bucharest, but her real passion was flying. Her first husband opposed it, so naturally she divorced him and then trained at the Mircea Cantacuzino flight school. And believe it or not, this marriage had a better ending than her next one. More on that later. Now guess who went on to become Romania's first official female flight instructor?
Her name is Virginia.
And she was also famous for flying upside down, intentionally, not like me. With their talents established, the stage was set for the squadron's first real test, the grueling, dangerous mission to Odessa. The White Squadron's baptism by fire came on the battlefields of Odessa in 1941, where courage and skill were tested against both war and nature. At that time, the squadron included aviators Nadia Russo, Mariana Drăgescu, and Virginia Thomas. On July 10, Virginia Duțescu joined alongside volunteer nurse Ioana Bica-Grădinescu, who had previously participated in the Galați maneuvers as an aircraft nurse. By August 20th, the squadron's aircraft had transported around 200 wounded soldiers, and during the Battle of Odessa, each plane flew up to 4 missions per day. Landings were made on improvised airstrips, and stops on the ground were brief to avoid attacks by Soviet aircraft. The 1941 campaign ended on November 6, when the planes were brought to Pipera military airfield for general maintenance. For understanding the assignment, as the kids would say, all squadron aviators received the Order of Aeronautical Virtue with swords, Golden Cross, while nurse Ioana Grădinescu was awarded the War Aeronautical Medal. The squadron concluded its campaign on November 6, 1941, and returned to Bucharest. The intensity of these missions led Virginia Duțescu to resign from the squadron shortly afterwards, which is completely understandable. I mean, let's be real, most of us wouldn't even sign up for something like this in the first place. The success of this mission bolstered the squadron's reputation, paving the way for more pilots to join, each adding new skill and strength to the team. As the White Squadron grew, it attracted accomplished and fearless aviators, each with her own remarkable story, from world record parachutists to diplomatic trailblazers. Smaranda Brăescu was a Romanian parachuting and aviation pioneer, holding multiple world records of the time, which is why she was nicknamed Queen of the Heights. She was one of the first women holding a parachutist license, and in 1931 she set the women's world record for highest parachute jump from around 6,000 meters. 1 year later, she established the world record for crossing the Mediterranean Sea between Rome and Tripoli, which was an 1100-kilometer flight completed in 6 hours and 11 minutes. And then on, she became a heroine, and she was escorted by 30 other planes to an air show in Canada. I bet if she were around today, she'd be doing stunts for Red Bull. Although she had already obtained her pilot's license in the United States, to have it recognized in Romania, she had to complete training at the Mircea Cantacuzino flight school in 1937. And at the start of the war, she was mobilized as an instructor at a parachuting school, and later had to fly as pilot for transport squadrons, transporting troops and equipment. For the White Squadron, she carried out reconnaissance missions, scouting locations for landing wounded soldiers, and checking the safest route for supply flights. Victoria Pocol, born in Transylvania, began her groundbreaking career at just 17 as the first female employee of Romania's Ministry of External Affairs. Based in Bucharest, she handled French-language documents, including technical analysis of coal mining machinery and other work that demanded precision, technical skill, and reliability, showing she was trusted with sensitive information from the start. Despite her diplomatic work, Pocol's true passion was aviation, and she was one hell of a pilot. Get it? Her name means hell in Hungarian. She earned her pilot licenses and graduated from the Mircea Cantacuzino flight school in 1935, participating in air competitions and aerobatic demonstrations. Now, guess who served as a liaison pilot, meaning a communication and observation pilot bridging gaps between units?
Victoria!
Now, let's take a look at a lesser-known member, shall we? Maria Nicolae, a 1942 graduate of the Bucharest Civil Aviation School, was formally appointed as a liaison pilot in the White Squadron by the Air Staff Command, and she served on the front carrying out vital evacuation missions under challenging conditions. Sadly, I couldn't find more information about her. summer. With a full team in place, the squadron faced its next major challenge, the deadly and pivotal Battle of Stalingrad. The pilots of the White Squadron now faced one of history's bloodiest conflicts. Amid freezing temperatures and encircled armies, their humanitarian flights saved countless lives. In April 1942, the Military Air Transport Group was formed to supply ammunition and materials, maintain communications, and transport personnel. The White Squadron was divided into two sections. Section 1 included Nadia Russo, Mariana Drăgescu, and Virginia Thomas. You know, the OG squad. Section 2 included volunteers like Maria Nicolae, Smaranda Brăescu, and of course Victoria Pocol with her personal aircraft. Their primary mission was providing humanitarian aid during the Battle of Stalingrad, the deadliest battle of World War II. Axis and Soviet forces fought amid a devastated urban landscape, and all the bang-bang crash wham actually took place with brutal street fighting and tens of thousands of civilian deaths. Soldiers endured freezing temperatures, starvation, and disease, and Stalin's order number 227 forbade any retreat from Soviet soldiers under threat of execution. For Romania, Stalingrad was the deadliest military loss in its history, with roughly 150,000 soldiers killed, wounded, or captured. This clash was a turning point in history, not only shattering the myth of German invincibility, but it also eroded trust in Romania's leader Ion Antonescu, because yes, Antonescu wasn't only responsible for, the pogroms and the ethnic cleansing going on in Romania, but also the deaths of tens of thousands of Romanian men who were conscripted against their will and sent to the Eastern Front with minimal preparation, under-equipped and untrained. Yet Romanian nationalists today are somehow still simping for him. And if that wasn't enough, in 1942, Antonescu got into some beef with none other than Ioana Cantacuzino, and he sent her to the Târgu Jiu prison camp. Now, back in Stalingrad, dangerous missions followed more dangerous missions, each more dangerous than the previous one, often flying 3 or 4 flights per plane daily, transporting wounded soldiers. Now, operations paused when partisans destroyed a train carrying gasoline, and in October, Section 1 withdrew to Romania for maintenance, and aviators attended the volunteer nurses school at Queen Elizabeth Military Hospital. Section 2 continued frontline operations until January 1943. For their bravery, the pilots were decorated, and Smaranda Brăescu was transferred to the Heavy Transport Squadron. Even after Stalingrad, the squadron continued to evolve, welcoming its final members, whose youth and skill ensured that the mission would continue despite mounting dangers. Stella Huțan-Palade was born in Bucovina, northern Romania, and later moved to Bucharest with her mother and siblings after her father passed away. At 19, she worked as a store clerk when her older brother, George, introduced her to aviation. She quickly earned her glider pilot's license and attended theoretical flight courses at Bucharest Polytechnic. Interestingly, the third Huțan sibling was also involved with Romanian aviation. Viorica Elena Huțan was Romania's first official female flight attendant. Stella trained at Roșiori de Vede and obtained her first and second grade licenses, which were later confirmed as military licenses. So guess who was the youngest female aviator to join the White Squadron?
Stella?
After her fiancé fell in the Battle of Leningrad, she recognized the urgent need for humanitarian aid and petitioned the Minister of the Air to join the White Squadron, and her request was granted. She trained on multiple aircraft including RWD, PWS, Nardi, Clem Model 25, Büker Bujungman, Clem Model 35, blah blah blah. I'm talking like I know the difference between them, but honestly I don't. She served on the Crimea front and in one notable flight carried blood supplies and a medical captain across a mountain range in adverse weather, earning Mariana Drăgescu's nickname for her, the bad weather pilot. At the same time, Ștefania Silvia Iubceanu joined as well, but I couldn't find any information about her. With the complete roster of aviators, the squadron turned its attention to the treacherous skies of Crimea, where evacuation missions would be more perilous than ever. Deployed on the front lines in Crimea, the White Squadron faced one of the war's most dangerous theaters, flying directly into conflict to save lives. In May 1943, all female pilots of the White Squadron were reorganized into Section 1, including Mariana Drăgescu, Virginia Thomas, Stella Huțan, Maria Nicolae, and Victoria Pocol. One of the founding members, Nadia Russo, had resigned due to health issues. The unit operated 6 aircraft and was deployed in July to the Simferopol airfield in Crimea, where they transported wounded soldiers from the Cuban front, not to be confused with Cuba. The Cuban front was a critical, highly contested area on the Eastern Front, where control over resources and strategic positions made it a focal point for both Axis and Soviet forces. After only 2 flights, Maria Nicolae returned to Bucharest, while the remaining pilots continued missions under increasing dangerous conditions. During the Crimea mission, Victoria Pocol was scolded for disciplinary issues, but she was like, Crimea River, so she was recalled in late August. The section later lost a plane in a forced landing caused by engine failure. With the Soviet advance making things even more unsafe, the section was disbanded and its pilots repatriated on September 22, 1943. After the war ended, their courage was unquestionable, but the world they returned to was harsh, unappreciative, and often hostile. Throughout their service, the women of the White Squadron maintained an impeccable safety record, completing hundreds of evacuation and reconnaissance missions. Between 1941 and 1944, they airlifted approximately 7,000 to 9,000 wounded soldiers, cementing their legacy as pioneers of military humanitarian aviation. However, after the war, their achievements were ignored. Most of them came from wealthy, Western-connected backgrounds, and under the communist regime established after the rigged 1946 elections, they were defamed, expelled from aviation, and some of them were even imprisoned. Smaranda Braescu, the celebrated parachutist, protested the rigged elections and was sentenced in absentia, forced to live in hiding under a false name, possibly in my city Cluj-Napoca, where some sources claim she eventually lost her battle with cancer. Marina Știrbei lost all her possessions and barely escaped the country. Nadia Russo was sentenced to 7 years for fabricated espionage charges and spent her final years working in a factory without a pension. After the war, Virginia Duțescu's second husband, aviation captain Constantin Abeles, fled to Turkey, which made Virginia a political target, even though they were already separated. Man, SMH. The communists accused her of espionage because of this and sent her to forced labor at the Danube Black Sea Canal, a massive communist-era project where political prisoners endured harsh conditions. Some sources say she served her sentence alongside Maria Nicolae. Mariana Drăgescu was removed from aviation for alleged unhealthy social origins, whatever that means, and for supposed anti-Soviet activities, retiring as a typist with a low pension. Her military service was only officially recognized in 2012 when she turned 100 years old, and she received the honor of the Romanian army emblem with a peace insignia. Victoria Pocol lost her beloved airplane in the Allied bombing of Bucharest. She was dismissed from the Ministry of External Affairs in 1947 and likely died around 1950 after a serious illness. Ioana Cantacuzino, the founder of the famous aviation school, lived her final years in isolation, poverty, and constant communist surveillance, a victim of both authoritarian and communist oppression, dying in obscurity despite her historical achievements. Stella Huțan Palade, married in 1945, continued flying until 1953 and later worked at the Ministry of Telecommunications, occasionally facing scrutiny from the Securitate, Romania's communist secret police. The luckier ones, Virginia Thomas, married a British officer and relocated to Berlin, while Irina Burnaya moved to Geneva following the communist takeover. Despite their heroism, none of these pioneering women received the recognition they deserved during their lifetimes, and most endured persecution, poverty, or exile under Romania's post-war communist regime. Historically speaking, women were always exceptional at flying, and during the 20th century we could finally replace our brooms with planes. The story of the White Squadron is one of courage, skill, and sacrifice, but it is just one chapter in the broader history of women in wartime aviation. Around the world, women defied expectations and risked their lives to protect soldiers and civilians alike. In the Soviet Union, the Night Witches carried out daring night bombing missions with pilots like Marina Rashkova, Valentina Grizabulova, and Lydia Litviak leading the way. In Yugoslavia, Maria Dražinović-Georgievich became the first female pilot of the Yugoslav Air Force. Meanwhile, some Polish women flew vital transport missions with the British Air Transport Auxiliary, including Jadwiga Piłsudska-Jeraczewska and Stefania Cecilia Wojtulanis-Karpinska. I'm kind of proud that I managed to read them out loud, damn. How did I do? Was it good? Now, the women of the White Squadron shared the same courage and commitment, yet they faced obscurity and persecution after the war. But we should not let them be forgotten. All members were incredibly brave and skilled, with fascinating backstories and boundless courage, which is exactly why I decided to share their stories with you. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up. If you want to support my channel and get access to some members-only content, get yourself a membership and subscribe, or the copper dick owl will greet you. Thanks for tuning in and have a nice day.